Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the latest edition of GX Talks, a series of global discussions among leaders in government and working with government on important issues of the day regarding citizen service, the application of technology, and the efficiency of government to deliver on missions that matter for the nations that they serve. We're very pleased today to be co-hosting this session from the IBM Center for the Business of Government. I am Dan Shenok, the Executive Director of the IBM Center. GX Talks is, as many of you know, a global forum to bring together thought leaders to support improved government experiences for government leaders and citizens and the folks that work with government around the world. We at the IBM Center engage in research that helps government leaders understand the best options and recommendations based on strong analysis from academic experts who provide their insights to us, and then we issue reports, and a number of our reports have dealt with these issues of improved citizen service, application of technology in a secure manner, protection of privacy, all issues that we'll get into today with our distinguished group of panelists. Our center also engages in a number of other forums where we interact with government leaders, including podcasts, radio interviews. All of our information is public domain and is available at businessofgovernment.org. So without further ado, I'd like to again welcome and thank our panelists for this morning. We have a tremendous group of leaders from the state and local arena in the United States, as well as perspectives from the federal government. So the first, I'm going to go state and local, and I'll go east to west. So I'd first like to introduce Lauren Aronson. Lauren is the Deputy Commissioner for Business Process and Design with the New York City Department of Social Services. Lauren held numerous leadership positions in New York City prior to her role today, and we'll hear more from Lauren about her work in a moment. Next, moving west to South Bend, Indiana, where Santiago Garces is the Executive Director for the Department of Community Investment in South Bend, the former CIO of South Bend, where he worked for Mayor Pete Buttigieg of later fame, and also the leader in Pittsburgh as the Chief Information Officer there before coming to this role in South Bend. Welcome, Santiago. And now we're going to move to California, where we'll meet Carolyn Statz, who is the Director of Innovation for Sonoma County in California. Carolyn leads important work in terms of bringing together technology to serve citizens for all of their needs as they deal with government and encounter government services to support their daily lives. Carolyn comes to the role having had a very successful career in the private sector. And last, we'll move to the federal government level in the United States, and we have with us Martha Doris. Martha is now the founder of Doris Consulting International. Martha had a long career in the US government, where I had the distinct honor of working with her when I was with our US Office of Management and Budget. Martha led the Office of Citizen Services at the US General Services Administration. And also prior to that, Martha was a leader in the Office of Intergovernmental Partnerships. So Martha spent much of her career engaging with the federal state nexus and local nexus. So she will bring great perspective as well. Welcome all. We look forward to a terrific discussion. And first, I just wanted to ask you if you'd speak a little bit more about your role for a few minutes, each of you. And we'll go in the same order as the introductions and the role that your agency plays in terms of serving citizens. Lauren, you want to start?
Sure. Thanks, Dan. As you mentioned, I'm Lauren Aronson. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Business Process Innovation and Design at the New York City Department of Social Services. As you can imagine, our department serves a large number of diverse folks here in New York City, about 3 million clients, and we manage a host of programs across a lot of different domains, including benefits issuance, rental subsidies, a fairly large shelter program, and many other areas. We have about a workforce of more than 15,000 people and service delivery sites, both direct service and contracted provider services across all 5 boroughs, numbering many, many, many sites. In my office, I'm in charge of basically large-scale transformation projects that sort of changed the business process that we use internally, but also how we engage with our clients. Two main areas of focus right now coming out of this pandemic include benefits delivery, which include projects like digital tools for our clients, consolidation of 34 hotlines into one number, aptly called the One Number Project, and also worker-facing tech to improve how we process those benefit applications. The second area of focus for me is on our rental subsidy management program. We have a fairly large population in shelter, and one of the tools that we use to help folks move from shelter to permanent housing is different rental subsidy programs. And we are streamlining the process of sort of application for those subsidies, whether you're in shelter already or whether you're at risk of needing to go to shelter. And the entire business process from application to eventual electronic funds transfer to our landlords as a stakeholder, which is a really new stakeholder group for us because generally we focus on our clients and the landlord, and that payment is part of their case. But we recognize that one of the reasons we need some help moving people to permanent housing is we need more housing stock. So encouraging landlords through a better customer experience to engage with us is a focus. So prior to the pandemic, New York City had already begun an effort to shift our client interactions to an online approach. We had spent sort of many years investing in our client portal, which is called Access HRA, and our citizens can access over 100 real-time data elements pertaining to their benefits cases across multiple benefits. It supports almost every single eligibility moment within the course of that benefits life cycle, from initial application to recertification and all the things that need to happen in between, like case changes or emergencies. And so since we had successfully shifted our client interaction in the SNAP program, which is the word for what we used to call food stamps, we had successfully shifted that prior to the pandemic by basically reducing foot traffic in our SNAP offices by about 52%, and moving those folks to a much more self-service, self-directed model of engagement. Our goal in doing that was to both provide an improved client experience as well as to reduce foot traffic and drive some efficiencies in our own operation. And as I said, we were successful in doing that before the pandemic. And I think the reason we were really successful is that at a point we sort of took on a very rigorous approach to human-centered design, and we really redesigned the entire portal to make it much more easy to use. And we used insights that we had gathered from our on-site PC banks from clients over a period of many years. And we incorporated a lot of those design insights into our portal. We also really studied up on behavioral design and messaging principles, choice architecture, and other sort of behavioral economics concepts, and incorporated those into our new designs. So we believe that producing an end user product that compares positively to the other modern examples of how clients interact in their life across other domains is the real key to getting adoption of these types of tools and becoming successful in these two goals of better customer experience and less foot traffic. If you convince people that the experience that they're having online is trustworthy and comparable to what they are seeing in other domains, then uptake becomes a much easier exercise. So in essence, good design creates this ease of use and professionalism that clients, deserve and have come to expect, especially at some of their most vulnerable moments. So in March of 2020, when New York City became sort of the initial epicenter of the global COVID-19 pandemic, many jurisdictions here in the United States did struggle to figure out how to serve clients at a distance in a remote way. We were really lucky in that we had a digital channel that was already well proven and was able to support our clients. We did the best that we could in terms of redeploying staff to process what was an extremely high number of applications for us. And we, even during the pandemic, did leave at least one center in each borough open, but for the most part, we closed our offices and our workers were shifted to working remotely from home. Not, as you can imagine, not all clients can engage with us online, and so it was important to us to leave at least one service center in each borough. So as a result of all of the initiatives that we had done before the pandemic, we were able to absorb the increase in applications for benefits. And we saw during the first part of the pandemic, the first 6 months, more than 100% increase in the number of people who were applying for help, which is, awfully a lot of additional applications to handle at one time. And it became quite a whole agency effort, even for folks who were not generally in those jobs. Additionally, we were granted a state waiver here in New York prior to the pandemic. Our cash assistance program required an in-person interview. And for many years, we had been requesting that no longer be the case. And so we had built an online application for cash assistance, which we had deployed in our offices and folks were using from our PC banks. But at the start of the pandemic, New York State did allow us to waive that in-person interview. And so we were very quickly able to turn on the cash assistance application online at the very start of the pandemic. And that it was fortuitous, of course, that we had already built this and we're just waiting for our moment to release it. But following the effective blueprint that we already had in the SNAP program, we were quickly able to turn Access HRA into a portal that could serve cash assistance clients as well. And I'll just give a little bit of numbers and say that at this point, we really have built into our portal every eligibility moment that that a client requires to let them literally never come into our offices unless they really want to. We have information about their telephone appointments. We have information about when their cases need to be recertified, allow them to submit case changes. Of course, there were many case changes during the pandemic. Many people lost their job. Many people went on unemployment, and all those changes needed to be submitted to us to process. So from the start of COVID, which was March 2020 through June of 2020, we experienced the greatest surge in our SNAP applications. The agency received more than 113% increase in those types of applications, and in the cash assistance program, it was about a less than 60% increase, but still quite a bit. And all of those applications, 98% of them were coming through our online channel, which was our goal for so long. And it will be interesting to see now that our offices are reopening, whether or not that traffic stays online or does decide to come back. And that's a bit of a question mark. We did reopen our centers in these past few months, and I don't think we're seeing traffic nearly the same as we saw before the pandemic, but of course, we expect that there will be some additional foot traffic. And then that's an overview of sort of our story here in New York City.
Thank you so much, Laura, and really fascinating progress that you've made and your ability to move to such online service at such a scale level in New York. Let's move westward to a smaller city, but one that certainly has been in the news over the last few years, South Bend, Indiana. Santiago, would you care to comment?
Sure. I'd be happy to share our story. So I've had now the unique opportunity for the first part of my career in government. I worked as a CIO trying to help different departments navigate this digital transformation journey, and not only digital, just helping them transform their operations, bringing a number of tools. And I did that in South Bend and also in Pittsburgh. And in my current role, I am now the person responsible for the delivery of a lot of those services. So I'm responsible for all the permitting and licensing, zoning, planning, the affordable housing programs that the city has, code enforcement, a whole set of interesting issues to deal with. So when I was thinking about this conversation, I started thinking about, like, what are some of the things that are unique to digital transformations that are difficult to do without digital tools, without computers, without iPads, without this connectivity. And I started thinking, like, one of the main issues that we have in government is consistency, right? Like, we usually have a large ratio of customers to employees, and each one of them is a stakeholder that should have the same level of access. And but that's one of the main issues of corruption and other issues, like when people don't encounter an experience that's consistent. So digital tools allow us to make sure that the process is consistent in the case management and the backside of things, but also the access is consistent. So when I was in my previous role in South Bend, one of the things that we did was develop a knowledge management approach to our services. So we implemented a service management that typically is well known in the IT world, but to the municipal services. So we said, we want to create a taxonomy of all the things that the city does and be able to understand who's eligible for those services, when are they eligible for those services, what are the service level agreements, what is the level of expectations that people should have it, and build our CRM under those principles. And part of the challenge is, especially a local government has a long tail distribution of services. We have a few services that a lot of people use, and then we also provide a number of services. One of my favorite ones is, I was learning about this process that kind of threw me off the first time, was we provide a Christmas tree removal service that must be considered distinct from just a regular trash disposal service, and it is only eligible right around January or February. So what we did was we worked with the departments to create a process by which every couple of weeks these articles would be reviewed by people that had ownership of the content, and we asked them to write about each of these services being focused in very simple first grade grammar, the parts of the sentence. What is the service? Who's eligible for the service? When is the service available? Where is the service available? Where are the restrictions on the service, and how much is it gonna cost? And we ended up pushing 600 services online in these knowledge articles. And what we've been doing, I left and then came back, but what we've been doing is building accessibility for people to be able to request these services and to have full visibility around what are the services that, consistency, what are the services that other people have requested before, where are we with those services, how long has it traditionally taken to respond to those services. So I think that's being able to do this at scale and being able to do this openly is something that is uniquely digital. Now, in my current role, one of the things that we're facing the problem of having to do neighborhood planning in the middle of a pandemic, where the traditional tools that we've used of being able to meet in person and have workshops and whatnot were just not feasible because it wasn't safe for us to be with the residents. So we launched an engagement portal called together.southbend.gov, and we were able to get residents to start commenting and giving us ideas on a map of what are the things that they want to see in the neighborhood. And it's interesting because for us, it's partly just to be able to conveniently have communications with our constituents. But one of the features that people liked was the permanence of the pin. Like if you go to a meeting and you put a pin on a map, someone takes the map and then no one else can see what are the things that people have put on the map. If it's digital, it's permanent. Everybody can see it. In 2 months, in 3 years, you can see where that map is and what that idea was. And I think that sense of accountability was also something that was important. The last piece, I think that as I was reflecting here around like what makes good digital transformations, I think also starting to think about some of the challenges that I've encountered both in Pittsburgh and in South Bend has been, I think that there tends to be an overemphasis on the tools and thinking about, like, and a lot of times we put a lot of our hopes on digital. I've been part of projects where, we had issues with regards to permitting and licensing, and we said, we're going to get a new tool for that. And the reality is that it was the process of having to implement the tool, having to figure out what were those permits and those licenses. Why would a permit be distinct from each other? Why is it a Christmas tree collection different from a regular collection? All of those pieces that are not intrinsically digital are part of, like how the city works and how it responds to its constituents. It's aided by the digital piece, but it's something that needs to be kind of front and center. And the other thing that I think that I've seen that we're starting to get there, and Lauren alluded to it, but is more of this storytelling, is trying to use the behavioral component of this, understanding when and under what circumstances do our constituents think that they might benefit from this service. So government, we tend to be thwarted because we have a monopoly of a lot of services. People have to get water services from the municipal utility. They don't have a choice there. So they're kind of pushed to come to us for a lot of things, but there's in a number of services, particularly in social services, that kind of are optional, that we're trying to get and provide resources to a constituency. A lot of them are hard to reach because they're busy, because being poor takes time, and like they're trying to figure out navigating 3 jobs and dependent care and whatnot. But I think that understanding what is the journey of when would someone want to inquire and to become aware of this product or service that the city has, how is it that we make sure that we remind them? How is it that we make sure that we make the information accessible? So a quick anecdote, again, during the pandemic, we were, the benchmarks that we were seeing across the world was 30% or more of restaurants closing in Barcelona and in the UK. And in South Bend, we were really nervous about that, especially a lot of restaurants and a lot of these the small businesses are at the fabric of a lot of the economic activity. So and the federal government put out a number of tools, but they tended to be more beneficial for larger companies, people that had good bookkeeping, people that were a little bit more established, more formalized. So what we launched was innovation grants for restaurants, where we launched a very simple survey where we basically asked people, and we used the tools that we had, the digital tools, we're able to track of which of the businesses were licensed, how long had they been licensed, so on and so forth. So we kind of pre-qualified people with information we already knew from them. And then we just send them a survey of, what are you doing to make your restaurant safer for your customers and for your employees? And we're able to give out small kind of grants to help support people through the pandemic. We heard from one of the businesses that the money that we provided them enabled them to pay their taxes. Otherwise, they're going to have to foreclose on the taxes on their bar. And we're able to provide resources for and half of the restaurants got some of this money within 2 months, kind of an unprecedented, going from no program at all to fully delivering something within a couple of months. And it wouldn't have been possible without the digital tools, without the persistent investments in the data, and then in the infrastructure to be able to share the program. And in that case, we were obviously very keen on understanding why is it that they wanted to engage with us, and kind of thinking about the story of how to access us.
Thank you, Santiago. And when travel resumes, we'll all look forward to dinner in South Bend. That's a terrific anecdote. So let's now move to California, Sonoma County, one of my favorite places in the world, and the Director of Innovation for Sonoma County, Carolyn Statz. Carolyn, welcome.
Hi, Dan. Thank you. So I had decided how I was going to start, but between Lauren and Santiago, I have like all these thoughts now so I'm going to completely scramble it. So just keep an eye on me. Just quick background. I've been in the IT field for just about 30 years. And again, my predominantly in the private sector. So as the Chief Information Officer, most recently in the private sector for Birkenstock Sandals, which is a fairly well-known brand and name throughout the world. My background is heavy on enterprise resource planning, enterprise systems, supply chain, which is manufacturing, distribution, retail, consumer. So that has heavily informed the way I approach things at the county. So I do, I'm new to government about the last 7 years, but I approach things from an enterprise perspective. I am in the central IT department, and I am utilized as the innovation director by all the departments and agencies at the county. So I think just a couple of the key things that were talked about is one, Santiago brought up a great point. What we look at in innovation projects is we aren't as focused on the tool, but we are very focused on a sustainable platform. We're very focused on something that is scalable. We don't think, oh, this department is asking for this solution. We immediately look at, okay, where does this request impact other departments, and where's the client in the middle of that journey? Because we don't have the resources in government to build siloed solutions for everyone to keep functioning in that way. And we liken it to, as a client, how do we put ourselves in the citizen seat? And we use a model of going to the store. If you had to go make a trip to the store one at a time for each product you were going to buy, go buy one thing, go home. Oh, I need if you were going back into the back, be crazy, absolutely insane. And government works with, a lot of our clients are the clients who are in need of help and services. They are struggling in certain areas of their life. It might be substance abuse, might be mental health issues, it might be housing issues, it might be joblessness, it might be I need help with medical insurance because I'm not gainfully employed. All of these things are really critical. And how do we help those clients without duplicating effort? Also, with resource restrictions, how do we build something again that is vetted, sustainable, and supportable? And, the Access Initiative, which has won national attention and actually worldwide recognition and awards, is one of those initiatives. And so the safety net department heads, and for the listeners who may not be familiar with that term, the safety net in a county government refers to the Department of Health, which is mental health, substance abuse, and public health issues. A department that is human services. So I need medical insurance, I need job assistance, I need food subsidies, I need temporary housing. Child welfare is a department. So child welfare and child support services. Housing is a whole department for people who are homeless or precariously housed or low-income housing. And then justice is actually part of our safety net. So you have the sheriff, you have the jail, you have the public defender, you have the district attorney, and then you have probation. All of these departments were saying, we know anecdotally, we are working with the same client. And these our high utilizer clients are coming in and out of our systems, and we are not being effective in helping them be sustainable. And so they just cycle in and out. I get picked up on the street and I'm arrested. Now I'm sitting in jail. Then I'm given probation, and the judge says, you know, you have a drug problem. You're mandated to get drug substance support services from the county. So the county mental health services group come in. They work with that client. The client gets stabilized, but guess what? They don't have secure housing. But behavioral health doesn't deal with housing, so they get them stabilized. The person's still out on the street. Things still go wrong because they don't have housing. They finally get their housing, but they're using a substance again. They get into the housing doesn't allow substance. They're back out on the street, then they're back in the jail, and it just goes around and around and around. And so, you know, Lauren is speaking to human services, and that's a huge array of programs and services that she was talking about. And Santiago is talking about a lot of other community services that citizens are dealing with. So we looked at this and said, you know, we want to deal with all the active clients in all of these systems. So how are we going to do that? And so we partnered with IBM for this particular solution. And we did a few things that were key in helping us get started quickly. First of all, we did not build it from scratch, nor did we think of, we're going to build a solution just for high need utilizers. We're going to build a solution that in the event of any cohort that needs help, we can use that solution and create a care plan for that particular cohort. We started with a fire relief cohort. We've used mental health diversion. We had a COVID cohort. We were able to stand up a cohort immediately to deal with at risk for homelessness, COVID at risk, and over 65. And the solution was using some really key technology components. So again, back to what Lauren and Santiago were saying, you don't want to be tool specific, but you do want to be very solution conscious so that you can expand. So we didn't build it for a county of 500,000. You know, we said LA County is the size of a state. You know, it's 10 million. In fact, I looked it up last night. I think United Arab Emirates is about 10 million too. So we said, what's a great solution for mastering a client across all these systems? And that's where IBM came to the table. They came in with MDM. And IBM's MDM to master a client across multiple systems had been vetted, not by us, but by Homeland Security and the Department of Defense. It could do 7 million hits in 24 hours. Well, Sonoma County was never going to have that, but guess who might? LA County, New York City. There's some big areas that might have that. So, you know, we took technology that was scalable, that was open, but very secure, and had open APIs because we said, you know what, vendor, IBM, you need to play with some of the other vendors we've got in. So we're big on digital transformation, and we work with another vendor, SimplyGov, for electronic workflow and electronic signatures. And we said, you need to interface with that vendor, and that vendor is even in a different cloud than you're sitting in. And our care plan for this 360-degree care management solution that we built is in Watson Care Manager. Well, Watson Care Manager is also IBM, but it was a completely different vertical, completely different product. So, you know, we need to start driving our vendors the way we expect our technical solutions to work for us. And I think Santiago made a great point, and so did Lauren. You know, if you build good solutions, then your clients are going to start using them. But it's not just that. If you task your vendors with great scalable solutions that are built on solid technology with open APIs and interoperability, they should be vendor agnostic. Then you don't have to keep reinvesting in technology. You need to be able to scale the platform. So we have a scalable platform between MDM and Connect 360. We will never hit that threshold. But guess what? Because we didn't build it just for the county of Sonoma, Orange County has now adopted our solution. They're using it. We partnered with a county in Southern California. They're huge. They're, I don't know, 8 times our size. San Diego runs the same hub. Riverside, we're working with on a similar solution. It may or may not be an IBM solution, but we're partnering with them on how to do it. We're working with Harris County. It's the 3rd largest county in the country. They're going to do Access Harris County. Now, I can't say it's IBM, but what I can say is they're going to follow the same standards. And so what we need to do in government is we need to, you know, don't recreate the wheel. It's such an old saying, it doesn't mean anything anymore, but we need to be strategic in what we're doing. And when I say we, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm saying this is how we think at the County of Sonoma. We think enterprise, and we think scalability, and we think, how can we dynamically build things that can keep our consumer, our constituent, our citizen, our client, whatever terminology you want, in the center of that. Another big initiative that I led, coincidentally with IBM on that one, was COVID. So to both Lauren and Santiago's point, COVID had a significant impact on our constituents. So we were able to use the access solution to deal with our high need, high utilizers, but we also started looking at, hey, we've got all these local businesses and we care about our local businesses. We don't want them failing. We had restaurants closing, all these small business owners, and we also had business and frontline providers that had to stay open, had to work in very uncertain conditions. And so we said, you know what? How do we help with public health? How do we help businesses stay open? How do we help employees safely work in a time where people are feeling very unsafe and very little is known? And we said, we're going to create an app. Local government does not start first with, let's make an app, because, it's so easy not to get an app on Apple and Google Play Store in the middle of a pandemic in a very short turnaround window. But we insisted, hey, we need a scalable platform. We don't want to build from scratch. What have we got? And we built on a solution that IBM was working on with one of the states on the East Coast, public health, for dealing with hepatitis C clients. And we said, hey, can we use that platform? And can we spin and can we create something that is an employee self-check app that can give them a badge that they can do before they go to work? They can show up to work, they can show their badge. I haven't been exposed to COVID. Here's my CDC symptom check, and I've taken my temperature. And what do we give the employers in case that employee doesn't have a smartphone? I saw that in the chat. So what if you don't have a smartphone, or what if you forgot your smartphone? We designed the employer side of the app so that they could ask the same questions of that employee in order to achieve the same self-check before they started work. We designed it with the client in mind. We said, if I'm using an app and I'm doing a self-check, it better be done in 30 seconds or less. So we need to design with the client in mind, not the public health officer in mind. Public health officer would have had a 5-minute app, bless her heart, but we were able to hone it down to a 30-second experience. And we delivered that. We started this at the end of April. We delivered the first version on the Apple Store on Mother's Day, which was mid-May. And that we were the first county to deliver an app based on reopening businesses or helping businesses stay safely open during the COVID pandemic. And again, it's because we have a focus on how we choose our platforms, and then we share that with Orange County. So I don't want to exceed my time, but I think those are key focuses that kind of build on things that Lauren and Santiago were talking about.
So much, Carolyn. What a tremendous progress you led in adapting technology and providing a model that other counties have been able to pick up, and also using the progress that other counties have made and adapting that yourself. So 3 tremendous stories from leaders at the state and local level. Martha, do you want to give us a perspective from the national picture?
Sure. Had to get that mute button. I think it's interesting, like Carolyn, when you hear all these different stories, it sort of rattles your brain and to how to kind of bring it all together. As Dan mentioned, I actually spent my entire career until I retired about 6 years ago in the federal government at the General Services Administration. And there, so many pieces fit together. I did work in the intergovernmental solutions, which we worked with federal, state, local governments and international governments, as well as when I was in the Office of Citizen Services, and we did the federal portal, USA.gov. We answered phones through the contact center. We distributed print publications, and then we worked with all of these other agencies across the federal government to help them improve the services that they delivered. And we also created challenge.gov and did a lot of work in the prize and challenge competitions to try and infuse innovation and the way of thinking around innovation across the federal government. And it's there that I really focused on customer service and helping other agencies to deliver services to their customers for about 15 years. And, you know, everybody's stories, at the center of everyone's stories is this, the public, the citizens, small businesses. You know, we all serve, you know, seniors and different patients. You mentioned the hepatitis C patients and people that need social services, and students for federal student aid, and taxpayers and beneficiaries. And all of those are just kind of the segments of the population that we refer to as, you know, the generic customer at the federal level. I mean, trust is at the heart of the public sector. And that was mentioned as well. When the public isn't able to solve their problem or easily access the information or the services they need, especially at critical times in their lives, like we heard around, you know, small businesses and during COVID times, it's been difficult because when the citizen looks to the government to solve their problem, they look at the government, and they don't always know what level of government that they need to get services. So the federal government's been, I called it flirting, which might not be the right word, but flirting with improving government services for many, many years. And I say that because it's really easy to say customer service, customer experience, but it's not an easy thing to do. It is about changing the DNA of everyone in the organization to understanding and being customer focused, putting the customer at the center of everything that you do. And so we've recently acknowledged through some new guidance that's come out around improving and transforming citizen services, that every interaction that we have with the public from the government perspective is an opportunity for us to demonstrate that the government understands and is able to meet our customers' needs. And that's really the definition of customer experience at the federal level. Citizens deserve to be able to interact with their government at important times in their lives and be able to have their needs met. And we define customers like officially as the public, other agencies, employees, suppliers of products and services. So we're expanding everybody's understanding, because many agencies at the federal level will say, we don't have customers, or many organizations within an agency will say, we don't have customers. And everybody across all levels of government have customers, whether they're putting a laptop on someone, or a desktop on someone's desk, or whether they are actually delivering a social service or answering a phone. So we are looking at how the federal government can look at life events, so that we look at it from the citizen's perspective, and how do you bring together all levels of government and agencies to work together to provide those life events. We have several pieces of legislation. One's the 21st Century Integrated Digital Experience Act, and now this guidance that I was talking about, where we're really integrating customer experience into the performance management, budget, and strategic planning, elevating the level of attention to higher levels within the government, all the way up to really the chief of staff of the president and the director of OMB, connecting it to the ability to use the discipline of customer experience in diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and really driving towards digital and self-service. It's not digital, it's digital first, but not digital only in terms of customer experience. So customer experience really involves governance, strategy, performance measures, voice of the customer, understanding your customers, performance management, culture. So it's a very overarching, and design, and everybody's talked a little bit about how services were designed, which is a critical part of this. So I'm gonna stop there in the based on our timing, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Martha, for rounding off the picture from the federal perspective, and how the federal government interacts with state and local governments and providing services in the areas that our other speakers talked about. We've had a rich discussion already in the chat with folks chiming in, and some of our panelists have been providing responses. I'm going to integrate some of those questions into some of our discussion points that we have. And so first is talking about the journeys that customers and citizens take in terms of how they're accessing service, and how to develop journeys that empower and delight the customer, as opposed to make them think they're going through another government bureaucracy. And in the chat, a couple of comments came in about how do we do this for people with different access for technology. Carolyn, you spoke a little bit about that. How do we differentiate that in terms of, as people go back to work, they're interacting in person, they're continuing to interact online. Lauren, you talked about, looking at the stats as to how that will evolve when people go back to work in terms of access to services, and then different cultural backgrounds. So all three questions in the chat talked about how do you create journeys that address customers where they are and at different points of their life. There's not just one customer with one profile. Anybody want to take that on?
I have a few thoughts. One, Dan, you mentioned delighting the customers, and I think that some of the private sector customer experience language in terms of providing wow experiences or delighting the customer has actually impeded the federal government's ability to adopt customer experience as a true business discipline, right? Citizens expect to get the services that they want in a timely manner. They want to know, they want consistent information across channels. And so I'm on a marketing campaign for, getting people to understand that it's not a fuzzy pizza party on Friday thing around customer experience. It really is hardcore discipline that involves everything everybody's talked about. Now, in terms of designing journeys, like looking at the major functions and tasks that your different segments of your customer base want to take when solving some of their problems. So looking at the personas, looking at the different, and I think we're finding that just looking at it in a persona-based way doesn't give us the information that we need around underserved populations. So really starting to, because we don't, at the federal level, we don't even have data to know what our like current situation is with serving, underserved populations, because a lot of people didn't even collect race data over the years. So data is such a big component of it, but using that data, looking at the different segments of population, looking at the major journeys that they're taking, and then just really walking through it with everybody that touches that journey so that you can start bringing people together across your entire agency, your entire government, levels of government, and asking those questions about, how do they access things? And those questions around, what if they don't have the technology that they need? How do we meet those people where they are? I'm sure everybody else has something to add to that.
Yeah,
piece.
I mean, I really agree with what you're saying, but I think I would take it one step further, which is to say that people at the federal government are not dealing directly with the population, and actually the insights come from actually sort of interviewing and observing and prototyping with the people who are actually going to be engaging with the tools, whether it's folks who are applying for a benefit or on a benefit, or CBOs who are working with those folks to do that, or with landlords who are trying to engage with you in a B2B way. And so I think that the insights come from engaging with the actual end users. And I think one of the things that we in New York City have tried to do very purposely is to not make assumptions about what makes sense to people and what is a good design in our opinion, which is to say we create focus groups. We go to our offices. Before the pandemic, we would go to our offices with actual prototypes and ask our clients to engage with them and find where the pain points were in the design, iterate on the design, and release something that is hopefully intuitive. Because I think Martha, to your point, it's when you're applying for food stamps or cash assistance, or you're trying to get out of shelter with your family into a permanent housing situation, it's not about delight. It's about how quickly can I do this, and how easy can the government make it for me to do what I need to do to meet my basic needs. And so I think in the pandemic, that became a real issue. Like, how do we engage with our end users as we're rapidly producing new things to help them? And one of the approaches that we used, just like everybody else, was sessions on Zoom with CBOs, in some cases to stand in place of an actual client, landlords on Zoom, where we showed them designs and got feedback. And I think that was difficult to coordinate, especially under those circumstances. But in the end, it really has helped us to create designs that are so much more intuitive. Things that I thought was a great design, our landlord and users were like, what does that mean? Like, what do I do here? And it was sort of genius that they told us that we had done it wrong before we did it in real life. So I think somebody asked in the chat how we do these business process innovations under these circumstances, and that's basically it. Yeah, we started with personas, but it's not really enough. And I think taking the time, especially for we added emergency grants on Access HRA during the pandemic, and it's a complicated set of questions and helping folks determine what they're really requesting versus what they're not requesting. And the only way that we really could get through that is by having an end user who knew nothing about anything show us what they would do if presented with a certain set of designs. And we really learned quickly that our going in position was not the right position in terms of the final product.
Thanks, Laura. We had a researcher from the University of Michigan, a scholar named Yen Ong, do a paper on ethnographic research as part of the process that you're describing. And she looked at services around the world and came to the same conclusion, that you could really do deep ethnographic research with populations receiving services to discover, and so put some analytical rigor behind the points that you've observed empirically in the city. Santiago, I know you wanted to make a point.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick point. I think I'd say I would agree. First of all, good design saves money and saves time. So it is important, but good design is also expensive. And part of the challenge that we have in government digital experiences is the expectations that our constituents have, because, like they go to Google, Microsoft and whatnot, and they see these like very highly customized experiences that are beautiful. And, I used to have a conversation with our city council. They asked us to create a landlord registration process, a process to track landlords in the city. And, they're like, why aren't the buttons here? I wanted to look, like customize how it looked and how it felt and the interaction. I said, for every button that you see in any website, there's hundreds of engineers and designers that are all considering exactly how it looks, how it functions, how it looks when you hover over it with your mouse, when you click on it, and they're constantly thinking about that. And in government, because we have so many services, for any one thing that we do, there's just really not that much time now. So my point would be, what I found is that you have the first thing is like good design requires intentionality, and then trying to find a way in which you marry a way and say, all right, let's focus on what are the pain points and what is it that we need to solve for through good design. And obviously you want people that reach us usually are experiencing really tough stuff. Yeah, they're having tough situations. So we want them to be delighted. We want them to leave. What is annoying about government? Arbitrariness, lack of transparency, feeling that someone's like playing with you and you just don't know. And I think the digital tools have an incredible ability of addressing a lot of those issues. But and the trade-off that we have is, as Caroline mentioned, we're working on enterprise systems. So we're usually trying to have a lesser number of footprint of the kinds of systems that we have that can do the most number of things. And that means that there's a trade-off where we're reducing customization to increase enterprise value. And that makes it a little bit harder. But the good thing is that there's also increasingly more and more our vendors get better at it and allow us to make it easier to customize and to have great experiences without having to, like do a little bit more hackery behind the scenes, going in and messing with this CSS and messing with the JavaScript of an application to try to make it, which might break it or might make it more insecure. So it's getting better, but it is a tension that we have to constantly be balanced, going back and forth.
I don't know if I could just add on to the end of what Santiago was saying. It is very difficult when the solutions are expensive. And the list goes on and on of what we don't like about government. But what I wanted to say is one thing we did with intent was to say, we are not special. We are not special. The county of San Diego, 10 times bigger than our county, had spent upwards of $55 million in building this hub solution with IBM, which the solution is now an off-the-shelf product. So what we said is, we don't have any of the pockets of San Diego, and we're not special. Our client in the county of Sonoma, who is homeless and experiencing mental health and substance abuse and child support issues, is not different than the client in San Diego. What the doctor wants to see in vital stats is not going to be different. So we are going to lift and shift. And we went live at $1.8 million, not 55 million, $1.8 million. So what I want to say is that if we link arms in government around the world, we can have economies of scale. We can insist on a sustainable, buildable platform, and we can have an exciting experience for the clients. And to Martha's point, the federal government, it's a balance between, structure and flow, rigidity and fluidity. There has to be a balance. You have to, at the end of the day, report up. But guess what? Ethnicity and race is actually components of many of these different siloed systems. Not all of them, and not each system has the same client, but many systems have the same client. And when you get all those clients mastered, you actually have a lot better picture of your underserved populations. So you can't forget, this back end that needs to report up to the state. You need to get reimbursements. The federal government needs to be able to understand what's going on because they're funding a lot of these initiatives. But you need front ends that are dynamic and flexible so that you can respond quickly. We're going to take the app that we did for COVID for employee wellness check, and now we're going to use it for crisis mobilization units. Completely different. It's going to be working with local police and individuals, and CBOs are community-based organizations that work with individuals in stress. And we're going to build an app for them, same platform. And guess what? All these apps are going to feed the same hub. So our ability to understand what's happening with our client, it has that structure in it. And our tools to interact with the client have the dynamic component. And I believe it's possible because we're doing it. And this team is definitely doing it. So.
Thank you, Carolyn. And I think that as a citizen, if I were in any one of your jurisdictions, although we started out by saying is delighted the right term, I'd probably be delighted by the result that you're describing. So we have just a few minutes. We're going to, with the panel's permission, I think we can go a little bit over the hour. So there's another question which relates to the role of technology, and various comments in the chat kind of refer to this, and how to think about leveraging. We've talked on this call about new technologies around AI or hybrid cloud. We've talked about how those technologies can help reduce burden. Sort of thinking about, where do you think about technology in the development cycle? We've heard about don't think about it up front. but also important to think about the platform. And then a couple of comments came in the chat that are somewhat related. Technology introduces significant privacy concerns when you're dealing online with individuals' lives, especially in terms of getting social services delivered. And also we had a comment about the access to those services. Could there be alternative funding schemes? And somebody raised the prospect of paying through cryptocurrency for these services. So all of these sort of evolving technology frameworks in terms of service delivery. Any comments on that in terms of starting off?
Be happy to start. I'd say with regards to, again, precisely because one of the things that really upsets people is inconsistency in treatment. One of the things that I've, and the different projects, I led a large project, $6 million project in Pittsburgh on completely redoing the permitting and licensing system in the city, and with a big focus on creating this like one-stop shop experience. And one of the things that we focus on is making sure that there was parity on the experience and the quality of the experience, regardless of whether you access it online, whether you called 311, did you go in person, did you use a kiosk, that it was the same experience. And in some sense, like the higher the level of intervention from a government employee, the higher the cost of delivery of the service. Like people are expensive, buildings are expensive, whereas having a server in the cloud is a little bit less expensive and can handle demand and so it was trying to like make sure that we're the one company that can never turn people away. Everybody's our customer and they will always be our customers, but trying to use the funnel in a smart way in which we could try to address as much of the issues digitally, but that we were having consistent experiences regardless of where you were going. And definitely on the back end that we were having the same information and that we were being able to be as diligent and kind of savvy with the data that was generated.
Other thoughts on this question about the role of technology?
I'll give it a little shot. I'm not a technology expert by any means, but I have seen, I believe that the core of improving the service delivery is really understanding your customers and its qualitative and quantitative data, and using technology to actually collect feedback and insights real time from customers, from the citizens during different parts of their journey, allows you to roll it up quickly, and it's almost impossible to do it manually, especially at the federal level. I mean, when you think about the Social Security Administration, they touch every person cradle to grave. I've got some data around the number of people that are touched from federal agencies, and things like taking those pain points as you go through some of your journey mapping and identifying places where technology can enhance or enable accelerate cloud technology, for example, that you mentioned, Santiago. If so many agencies hadn't moved to the cloud, we would not have been able to make the shift during COVID in terms of moving to remote work, delivering as many digital services, and the agencies at the federal level who had not invested in the technology were not able to pivot as quickly as the other agencies. So I think technology is a huge enabler to doing everything that we want to do from that standpoint, from the front end to the back end, whether it's understanding customers or delivering it on the back end. So, the AI stuff around, like especially in contact centers, and we haven't talked much about like all of these channels and how they should work together and how you should, we talked about the digital services, and Lauren, you mentioned, are people going to come back, into the offices? The better the digital services, the less calls you're going to get in the contact center and the less visits you're going to get into the your in-person facilities. So it's really incumbent on us to think about those, use of cell phones and use of apps so that people can do things in a way that they can use a digital service.
Thanks, Martha. We're coming toward a close. Carolyn, Lauren, any final thoughts? Carolyn, I know this sort of fits into that enterprise perspective on technology that you described earlier.
On the privacy question, that always comes up. And so we used our electronic workflow product, and we always capture consent. So if you're going to participate, let's say in the Access Initiative, then a specific consent for sharing those data sets is definitely part of the process of working with the client. So if the client does not consent to be sharing, then they would not be part of that particular program. So, and then of course, you know, the security around the data hub is both roles-based security and also attribute, all the way down to the attribute level. So I may have the same role, but there may be an attribute that only a specific person can see. So there's a lot of security. And then we definitely don't have time for a cybersecurity conversation, but consent is actually a key component, especially when you're talking HIPAA, CFR 42 data.
Thanks. Lauren, last word.
Yeah, I would just say that I think you said, Dan, technology is expensive. And I think that, and Carolyn, you mentioned that other counties are working with you to develop similar concepts, whether it's the same actual technology solution or not. And I would say that the things that are largely 100% reusable are sort of the designs, the workflows, and things like that. And we gave all of that type of information to the District of Columbia during COVID, so they could quickly stand up a mobile app to have folks submit. So I think there is a way, and I think it would be so incumbent on the federal government to do this, is to say who's doing good design for what programs, and can we sort of across the nation not recreate the wheel, and here's access to those good designs. And further, I think technology is expensive, good designers are expensive, to your point, Santiago, but what is not necessarily as expensive is incorporating some of the sort of behavioral stuff into your designs. And I think that really exponentially makes your investments more valuable by really thinking about what drives the customer and what is intuitive for them. So I think, everything is expensive, especially at large scales, but there is a way that we could all help each other sort of decrease costs by reusing good work.
Thank you, Lauren. And all of you talked about adapting work into your counties, at Martha, at the federal, state, local levels. Clearly a role for national governments to provide that best practice repository and ease of sharing across governments at lower levels of their countries. And we've heard tremendous stories of success and overcoming challenges and seeing opportunities from our leaders at the federal, state, and local level. I want to thank again Lauren, Carolyn, Santiago, and Martha for a tremendous discussion. And the Center for the Business of Government at IBM is again privileged to work with GX on this edition of GX Talks. Thank you again.